Hello there. I want to talk to you about the knife that I probably most commonly carry in the woods. Um, and I have to preface this with an understanding of what this channel is about. You will hear me speak about this a lot because I need people to understand, and I'm not trying to misrepresent who I am or what I'm doing here, but this is not a bushcraft channel. It's not an outdoor survival channel. I do believe that there are elements of bushcraft and elements of survival that I think that a woodsman ought to be familiar with, but I would not deem them actually bushcraft or survival. They're just general knowledge that woodsmen should know because you're out in the wild. You're out in an area that's not your home. There's might not be any civilization around you, and you are on your own. And so you need to have a basic grasp, and that's all I offer on this channel, a basic grasp of how to get along in the woods long enough to maybe how to find your way out, or if you found yourself in a situation where you had to stay the night, that kind of deal. And so what I'm talking about when I talk about a knife for the outdoors is a bit different. If you look at a lot of the bushcraft videos, they will talk about things like batoning wood with a knife and making feather sticks, things of that nature. I want to talk a little bit about that and why it's not really relevant to an outdoorsman or a sportsman or a woodsman, the kind of woodsman that I'm talking about, the kind of woodcraft, I guess you'd call it, that I practice. First of all, batoning wood, when I use a knife, any knife, I don't expect it to be a hatchet or an axe, okay? It's a knife. It has a cutting edge on it. Okay, so what I want is a knife that is sharp and cuts well, because that's the function of a knife. It's a cutting tool. Now you might call an axe or a hatchet a cutting tool. You put a fine blade on it, but it's not a cutting tool. Those are chopping tools. And while they do cut, it's more of a function of that edge along with the fulcrum when you're swinging, that arc when you're swinging that axe or that hatchet, and it's a chopping tool. My opinion, a knife is not a chopping tool. It's a cutting tool. So when we start talking about batoning wood, first of all, one of the scenarios that they will talk to you about, the biggest scenario that they will posit when it comes to batoning wood and things of that nature is that these guys, well, what if you're in the woods with just your knife and a ferro rod? Well, if you watch the bushcrafters, they've got 35 and 40 liter packs on their back with so much stuff crammed in that pack that they've got a bedroll fastened to the bottom of the pack to carry their bedding material, because it won't fit in that pack with all the other stuff they got in that pack. Okay, they got axes and saws. Some of them even have, they have the folding saws. Some of them have like 3-foot folding saws. Some of them have buck saws. Okay, and they're going in the woods with all of that gear. Okay, you're gonna tell me that they are so inept as a woodman that they're gonna walk into the woods and with a knife and a ferro rod, and that's all they're gonna carry when they go into the woods? I don't buy it. Okay, you have to understand that a lot of what they are doing is they are, well, let's face it, we're all playing. Okay, I'm playing. I'm enjoying the woods. I'm recreating. And whether they want to say it or not, they are in a large part doing the same thing. But also, and I have a great respect for this, they are demonstrating and practicing traditional techniques that have been passed down over time, and they're trying to keep that craft alive. There is nothing wrong with that. But like feather sticks, for instance, Okay, you're batoning wood so you can split it up to make feather sticks in a damp environment, so you can get to the center of the piece of wood where there should be dry wood. That usually doesn't really work all that well. Sorry, it doesn't, and I'll explain to you. First of all, I know from experience that if everything's soaked and the wood is this big around or smaller, that's soaked to the center. It's soaked to the core. If it rains enough, it doesn't matter. Also, even if you might be able to find dry wood, or if I could find dry materials of any kind, if it's that damp and that wet, there's a particular level of moisture in the atmosphere that's going to mess with you when it comes to trying to start a fire. Most of these guys will tell you, they will talk about these things and demonstrate them and tell you this is a skill you should know so that when you have damp conditions and stuff, you can make a fire. But inevitably, you will see a video of them talking about, well, what if it's all wet? What do you do? And generally what they do is they're going to find sapwood or fat wood, okay? Or they're going to carry a piece of fat wood with them. Well, first of all, fat wood isn't all over the place, okay? And in the eastern part of the United States, mostly, if you look around me, mostly what you're going to see is hardwood. Now there's a pine here, okay, or something. I believe that's a young pine, okay. And you can see some greener trees, coniferous type trees, okay. And you might find those kind of trees, but I know this area. There ain't no fat wood here, okay. There's not a bunch of laid down dead pine or spruce trees or anything like that. There's no fat wood in this area, period. It's just flat out, okay? And there's no sap producing trees that I'm aware of in this area, okay? So you're not going to go collect sap either, okay, to start a fire. This area right here doesn't have any birch trees. So you're not going to find birch bark. Okay. Honestly, a lot of that depends on exactly where you are at the time that you have problems, which is why you'll see a video or two on most of their channels when they talk about making fire in wet conditions, and they have some kind of help with them. Whether it's like a tradition or a purpose-made fire starter that you can buy, or whether it's something like cotton balls and Vaseline, which is my favorite, and I always carry that with me in the woods, or whether it's like the flat cotton makeup discs that they put wax or petroleum products, or they have got some kind of wet fire making capability that does not depend on the area around them. And they're all carrying, it's windy, but they're all carrying flame, okay? They are. Why? Because they understand that all of the stuff that they're talking about is well and good, but when it comes down to, is my fat rear end going to make it through the night, then I'm going to find and reach for what I know is going to work the best. Okay, so they all carry that stuff. So you have to understand that a lot of this is that they're just trying to demonstrate techniques to you that have been used down through the centuries. Okay, but that doesn't mean that they're telling you, if you get in a survival situation, pull your bow drill out, or your flint and steel out, or even your ferro rod, okay? They're going to reach for something handy and easy first. If this doesn't work, then they might resort to one of the others. So, and besides, when you start talking about batoning, I've never had to baton in the woods. I've been running around in the woods since I was 10 or 12 years old. Okay? Probably earlier than that, but not with any kind of intent other than playing around. 9, 10 years old, something like that. But I've been running, and I'm 60 almost. In just a few days, I'll be 60. Okay? And I've built many a fire in the woods under many different conditions, and I've never needed to baton any kind of wood, and I've never needed a feather stick. As a matter of fact, I only found out about feather sticks maybe in the last 10 years. Didn't know what they were. Never had any need of them. Okay, it's pretty damp out here now. We've had rain off and on for quite a while. But I could, if I wanted to, look around in here and find something I could make fire with. Particularly if I use something like a cotton ball with Vaseline in it. And you have to understand what I'm talking about is a woodsman, a sportsman. So why am I talking about that with knives? Because it depends on your perspective of how you're going to use that knife. Okay? And I'm not worried about trying to make feather sticks or batoning wood with a knife in the woods. Okay? The number one purpose for that knife is to cut, and cut well. That's it. So the knife that I normally carry, now I do carry other folding knives, and I do carry fixed blade knives from time to time because I have a few different knives and I enjoy carrying them and using them. Okay? But the majority of the time, what you will see on my hip is a buck 110. Why? Well, if you look at the history of this knife was introduced, depending on which site you get on, between 1963 and 1964. Okay? And this knife, regardless of what people think it's supposed to be, is a hunting knife. That's what this is. This knife was designed to replace a big, bulky, fixed-bladed knife. A knife that you could fold up, and it took very little room up, and you could put it on your hip and in a small case and carry it around in the woods, and it would be a knife that was that locked up so that it was almost as secure as a standard fixed blade knife. And Buck's lock mechanism, it doesn't play. And that's not a pun. There's no play in this whatsoever. This is locked back. For all intents and purposes, it feels like a fixed blade knife. Now, you might get one that has a little bit of play in it. The example that I have does not. Okay, if it is, it's a little bit. And it's designed, the shape of the blade, this is like a clip point, is designed for gutting and skinning animals, like medium to large size game, deer, elk, things like that. Okay? That's what this is meant for. As a hunting knife or as a sportsman's knife, it's an ideal knife. This has got Buck's 428C steel in it, and you'll hear all the knife guys holler about how much junk 428C is. Buck's Bow's heat treatment is spot on, as this knife takes and holds a really nice edge. I've never been disappointed in this knife in any way for all the tasks in the woods that I might want it to perform. I saw a guy recently, a video of a guy, he's overseas. I don't think it's someplace like England or something. I think it's like one of the, like somewhere in Norway or someplace like that, Scandinavia. You know what I'm saying? You get that kind of, okay? And he did a review of the Buck knife. First of all, you know, he had his gas mask on and he never took it off the whole video. And he took this knife, and the way he tested it was to stab a car door about 100 times with it, and then proceed to take it over to a big boulder and take a chunk of wood and sit it like this and beat it on that boulder till it broke. And his pronouncement was that this was crap, only he used the curse word. Okay, it's crap steel, it's a crap knife. No, you made a video because he said it's an American-made knife and it's crap. Okay, because American-made stuff has been the standard forever and ever and ever, and this guy evidently has got a problem with that, so he broke the buck to prove that this was crap. But it took a big giant freaking boulder to break it. Okay, 428C. It's a crap knife, and I wanted to post on his review, but it was like a year old. No, it's a crap review. Nobody's going to use this knife like that. Nobody in their right mind is going to take any knife and beat it against a boulder. What's the purpose? What's the survival purpose in that? Is there anything in that boulder you can use to survive except to pick up a piece off of it and bang somebody on the head with it? Hey? No. And if I need a rock, I can find one that's not yay big that I can pick up and actually throw. Okay? So anyway, this knife is not a survival knife. Although, you could ask a couple of the people that have had encounters with grizzly bears and fought the bear off with this knife, whether they consider it a survival knife or not. Look it up, because it's happened more than once. Okay? And they're still alive. One guy was like 63. You know, that was a while back. He might have passed by now. But he was alive at the time, and he lived many years after. Okay? Because he had a buck 110. And the bear learned to respect it. Okay, so, all right. This knife has served me really well for everything that I needed to do in the woods. And if you're looking for a folding knife that is very well designed, very strong, that will hold a good edge, it has this is like a 3 3/4 inch blade if you count from where the sharp edge starts, which is the way you measure a blade. You don't measure from here all the way down to the base. You measure the cutting edge to measure the length of the blade, despite what the police officer that pulled you over wants to claim. That's Virginia law says the cutting edge is the length of the blade. But anyway, I digress. You can't really go wrong with one of these. Now, if you want to do bushcraft and stuff like that, then, you know, and you want to baton and all of that, well, this is probably not the knife for you, but I could take this knife and start a piece of wood, and then take this knife and go find me a stick about yay big around, a limb about yay big around, and shape the end of it as a wedge and shove it in that crack and beat it with, and split that wood just fine without beating the living snot out of it. I could take my saw and cut the piece of wood lengthwise halfway through and beat it on another log, or catch it in the crook of a tree and pop that up and split the wood that way. I don't have to baton. Okay, if I needed that. I've never needed that. Okay, the only time I've ever used something like that was maybe in camp. Okay, where somebody had an axe or a splitting maul or something like that. Okay, to build a great big fire to get her sit around and okay, I don't need it, and I never have. But there's something else I want to say about knives in the woods. This is like a main knife. You'll see me carry this knife in the woods, okay? A lot. But this is not the only knife I have on my person. Hold on. Let me sheath this. I also carry a small, what everybody nowadays calls a slip joint knife. When I was a boy, this was just a pocket knife. Many different designs, but they were made the same way. And I love knives like this. I've always got one of these in my pocket. And so, you know, I wear cargo pants, camo pants, I don't care if it's really camo, but I got camo pants that are cargo pants. But I wear cargo pants a lot. I prefer them over any other kind of pant because they got a bunch of different pockets and they're thinner weight material than blue jean, which in my opinion, for me anyway, blue jeans, blue jeans get heavy really fast on me and tire me out, and these do not. But I've always got one of these of some kind in my pocket. Okay, so when I go to stick that buck or the fixed blade or whatever it is I'm going to stick on my side as a main blade, okay, one of these is inevitably going to be in the pocket of my pants. So why do I carry 2 knives? Well, in fact, I carry 3 because if I've got my pack with me, there's a fixed blade knife always in my pack. It sits in the bottom of the pack. Okay. But why do I carry one of these all the time? Well, first of all, this is what I carried when I was a boy. A knife, a simple pocket knife. This is what we call it. Okay. What some people would call Grandpa's knife. Why? Because I love these knives. They're beautifully made. The design and the way that they're made is fantastic. This is a bone-handled knife with nickel silver bolsters. This, I believe, is a muskrat pattern. It has 2 of the same exact blades, and these are designed for skinning and gutting. So when this one gets dull, you just switch over to this one. That kind of deal. And I like carrying them. I like carrying them because I've carried a knife like this all my life. And they're beautiful. They're a classic design. Why would I not want that in my pocket? That's one. But for another, these knives are smaller than that buck knife is, or any of the fixed blades that I carry. So these knives are going to be more nimble. They're going to be more suited to finer tasks than a bigger fixed blade or a bigger folding knife would be. So I can take this and do finer things with it. Okay. Also, this is a second edge. Actually, this is 2 extra edges. If I maintain both edges sharp on this knife. So that if I do something that damages the edge on my main knife, I still have a cutting edge. And so you'll see that you might not ever see this knife in use on a video, but I can pretty much guarantee you it'll be in my pocket. That's my philosophy and where I'm coming from and where this channel is coming from. And so, I mean, if you're doing something different to what I'm doing, well, then you're going to have to adjust accordingly. But for me, and what I do, as a matter of fact, I got 3 knives on me now because I forgot. Instead of carrying one of these, the last time I went in the woods, and instead of carrying the buck as a main knife, I carried this Buck Ascend, which has a pocket clip on it. So, like I said, sometimes I carry a different knife. I carry that buck probably 80% of the time, something like that, 80-90% of the time. But every now and then, and this just happens to be another buck, but it's a U.S. made buck. But that's what I was carrying the last time I was in the woods. So, you know, I don't need a big honking bushcraft blade for the things that I do. And if I get in a situation where I've got to make it through the night, I still don't need that because I've got a saw and I've got a brain and I have experience in eastern woodlands making fire any time of the season, any conditions pretty much. So I'm not really worried about it. So I mean, that's my take. I hope that you've enjoyed this talk. And once again, before I close out, well, there's a couple of things. When we talk about the Buck 110, I wanted to include this, but I forgot to tell you. This knife has been to war. And you say, what? Nobody carried a Buck 110 in the wartime. Talk to some of the Vietnam vets you might know. This knife was available at the PX, the Post Exchange. And there are many Vietnam veterans that bought this knife at Post Exchange and put it on their belt alongside the K-bar. And they used the K-bar for digging in the ground or other heavy-duty applications, but most of the cutting tasks were relegated to this knife here. So in a limited capacity, this knife has been at war. And one other thing I want to address about this knife in particular, people say, oh, this knife is heavy, because they're used to the more modern, lighter made folders. And to that I would say, yeah, it's heavy. Get my point? So, I love this knife. I always have, probably always will. But, look, I have great respect for bushcraft, for the techniques and the skill there. It's a wonderful thing. It's a there are a lot of old ways and traditional ways within the bushcraft techniques and community, and they're trying to keep those things alive, and I have mad respect for that. I'm the same way with a straight razor, or with the old Arkansas stones and India and crystalline stones and things like that, and for hand sharpening, which is a technique that's going away. Okay, so I try to preserve those. So I fully get bushcraft. It's just not something that I need in my daily life. Everything I need to do in the woods, I can do perfectly comfortably, just the way that I have done them all of my life. I don't need to learn any of those skills. There are some skills that I'm learning over time now, because I was remiss of them when I was younger. Things like map navigation with a compass and things like that. Okay, probably some other stuff. But, you know, I've gotten along in the woods all of my life perfectly fine with what I know. And I can pretty much guarantee you that, you know, if I get into a situation in the woods, I can handle myself well enough to get through that situation, get back home. So, but that's my take on knives. A knife is a tool, but it's a cutting tool. That's what it's meant for. It's meant to cut things. There are other tools that will do all that other stuff. A knife's not meant for that. My philosophy, the way that I approach things, yada, yada, yada. Bless you and have a fantastic day. I'll talk to you later.